The fire is gone. Not fading gone. No logs, no embers, no rescue, just windstone and cold that bites like a knife. But 800 years ago, people faced this exact night and lived. They didn't light more fires. They built systems that made fire unnecessary. They warmed clothes in ovens and slept over fermenting straw piles. They turned manure into heatstone, into sunlight, and livestock into living radiators. No cords, no generators, no second chances. Just brilliant design crafted by desperation and passed down through memory. When the forest ran empty, when the snow climbed the walls, they stayed warm without smoke, without flame. Today, as heaters hum and thermostats glow, we forget what real winter used to mean. But those ancient systems, they're not dead. They're waiting for those willing to remember. Medieval Europe didn't fear winter. They prepared for it like war, because when snow buried the roads and wind carved through stone, comfort vanished, and firewood wasn't guaranteed. Some years the forest thinned. Other times taxes or conflict stripped peasants of access. So people stopped depending on luck and started engineering warmth. They used heat like a weapon, redirected it, stored it, multiplied it. Houses were redesigned, beds became fortresses, even livestock became part of the plan. This wasn't luxury survival, it was poor, cold, desperate ingenuity. But it worked, because every degree of heat was earned and every method was built to last the whole winter. These weren't tips, they were systems, coded into daily life, refined by death and time. And though we forget them now, the cold still comes. And these ideas, they're still here, waiting in stone, in straw, in silence. Technique 1. Compost heat. It wasn't a fireplace, it wasn't a hearth. It was a pile steaming, stinking alive. And when the last log was gone, it was all they had. In the coldest corners of medieval life, heat came from the ground from rot. Villagers knew what we forget: decomposition produces warmth. So when winter dragged on and wood ran dry, they built heat from decay. Not tidy garden compost, but massive heaps of straw manure, kitchen scraps, and dead leaves stacked tall, soaked wet, left to cook. These piles burned quietly, reaching 60, even 70 degrees Celsius just from breaking down. They didn't sit and watch. They used it. Stone benches were pressed against compost walls to absorb radiant heat. Shallow pits were dug beside the heaps, lined with straw to warm vegetables, boots, and children. In brutal climates, they went further. Compost sheds, outbuildings made just to capture the heat of rot, used as workshops, sick rooms, or the last warm place to sleep. The smell terrible, but irrelevant. Because when your breath turns to ice and frost creeps into your bones, you don't care how warmth smells. You care that it works. And rot did. Technique 2. Baked clothing. When the house was cold and the firewood was gone, they didn't try to heat the room. They heated themselves. And they did it with something simple: a bread oven. After cooking stew or baking loaves, they slid their cloaks, boots, and tunics into the fading heat. Still damp from snow, still stiff from frost, the warmth softened them, dried them, and wrapped the fabric in comfort, not luxury. Strategy. On bitter mornings, that one gesture made the difference between stiffness and movement, between pain and strength. Some homes had warming shelves, stone slabs near the hearth, built not to cook, but to dry and heat clothes. Others used hot bricks wrapped in cloth, pressed into sleeves, tucked inside bedding. Wool held the heat well. Even rough linen felt alive again. At night, clothes were laid over warm ashes, so when dawn returned with its bite, the first thing they touched wasn't ice. It was warmth, not from the fire, but from foresight. Technique 3. Dark stone heat banks. Not every village had firewood, but every village had sunlight. Even in winter, especially in winter, they used it. Without knowing the term thermal mass, medieval people mastered it. They built with dark stone, stone that soaked up heat by day and let it go slowly, long after the sun was gone. South-facing walls were prized, darkened with soot, built to catch low winter light. Inside benches and walls stayed warm into the night, not from fire, from light. Some families placed flat black stones in courtyards, letting them bake all day, then carry heat indoors. Others created solar traps using stretched horn-oiled paper, even thin hides to capture sunlight in sealed windows. No wires, no glass, just understanding. And when frost clung to the grass, these walls, these stones released every degree they had stored. Not bright, not fast, but enough. Enough to keep a sleeping child from shivering. Enough to take the edge off a wind-chilled room. They didn't burn heat, they banked it. Technique 4. Animal heat. To modern ears, it sounds desperate, unsanitary, maybe even dangerous. But in the Middle Ages, sleeping near animals wasn't a last resort. It was a heating system. Livestock radiate body heat. Cows, goats, chickens, pigs. Not just alive warm. So medieval homes weren't always separate from barns. They were built together, one side for people, one side for animals, divided by nothing but a wood plank or a packed earth wall. The floor where animals slept was often lower, so heat would rise into the family space above. In colder regions, this became tradition. House barns, families upstairs, oxen below. The thick wood floor in between held back the smell, but let the warmth pass. Children, the elderly, the sick, they were given the spots closest to the stable wall because that was the warmest place in the house. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. And in a world without insulation, that made all the difference. Technique 5. Straw nesting beds. The cold didn't just bite, it crawled. From the stone, from the dirt, from below. And in winter, the ground didn't feel cold. It stole heat. So medieval people built their beds differently. Not raised, not soft, but insulated. They didn't sleep on top of the ground. They slept inside it. Shallow pits were dug into the earth, lined with straw, moss, old cloth, layer after layer until it trapped body heat like a cocoon. Families curled inside, wrapped in wool, fur, whatever they had. Children and the elderly were placed in the center. The strongest slept around them, forming a human shield. Even without fire, the warmth held. It wasn't comfortable, it wasn't pretty, but it worked. Because in a winter without wood, survival didn't come from fire, it came from layers. Technique 6. Earth channel heat flow. They didn't have central heating. They didn't even have chimneys, but they understood flow. Warm air moves. And if you shape the earth right, you can make it move where you need it most. In some monasteries and rural homes, they dug shallow channels through the ground, not deep, just enough to capture the warm air from kitchens' compost piles or livestock stalls, covered with stone slabs sealed with mud. These channels carried warmth from one part of the house to another. When fires were scarce, they redirected the little heat they had. They didn't fight the cold head-on. They rerouted the heat under the floor, along the walls, straight to where people slept. In France and parts of Wales, remains of these systems have been found low-tech hypocausts, built with nothing but earthstone and design. It wasn't luxury. It was silent, smart architecture. And in winter, every degree mattered, every trick counted, even one that lived underground. Technique 7. Hot stone sleeping pods. They didn't burn wood all night. They couldn't. Fuel was limited, but heat could be stored. In parts of Scotland and the Alps, villagers learned to build sleeping pods, low stone enclosures tucked into the walls, where heat didn't escape so easily. During the day, they heated stones in the hearth, not for cooking, for sleeping. When the flames died down, these stones were placed inside the pods, tucked beneath straw, wrapped in cloth or fur. The pods acted like thermal batteries. The heat didn't spread. It stayed. And those who slept closest, children, elders, the sick, could rest without fire. The design was simple thick stone, tight space, insulation from all sides, and just enough radiant warmth to survive the longest nights. It wasn't a bed. It was a furnace you could lie in, and it worked every time. These weren't hacks. They were systems, built not in comfort, but in crisis. When the logs were gone, when the cold took over, these people didn't give up. They adapted. They used compost as heaters, warmed clothes in ovens, slept with animals under straw beside stone. They borrowed heat from sunlight and stored it in clay, in walls in each other. Not one of these systems needed electricity. None needed fuel. Only knowledge and memory. Today, the power might still be on, but the storms are stronger, the winters are colder, and comfort is no longer guaranteed. So remember, this survival isn't about what you own. It's about what you know before the lights go out. Drop a comment. Which of these ancient systems would you try first? And subscribe, because knowledge like this, it doesn't just entertain, it prepares you.